Good evening, hello and welcome to the India Development Debate. I'm Nandara Rai in New Delhi. Is this a jolt to the incumbent government, the Bharatiya Janata Party? The Supreme Court today agreed to hear review pleas that challenged an earlier judgment of December 2018 and that had dismissed a CBI inquiry into the Rafale deal and dismissed the centre's objections to the petitions. With this review petition being filed, the petitioners, Yashwant Sinha, Prashant Bhushan, and Arun Shourie had allegedly used documents that the government said were stolen property from the Defence Ministry and illegally photocopied, and this is contrary to the national security. The Supreme Court today said those documents can indeed be admitted. It's not as simple as that, because these documents, based on these documents, we had also seen articles in national dailies which have been picked up far and wide. Congress President Rahul Gandhi, soon after today's Supreme Court verdict, said there is corruption in Rafale and that the Prime Minister has given 30,000 crores to Anil Ambani. Union Defence Minister Nirmala Sitharaman accused Rahul Gandhi of making comments that are in contempt of a court's order. Is this really a pushback to the government's objection to the review? Or is the government right in saying it's already won the Supreme Court verdict, and just because certain documents are being admitted, it does not mean that the verdict of December will be overruled and there will be a case of corruption? Here's a face-off.
आज सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने क्लियर कर दिया है कि चौकीदार जी ने चोरी करवाई है। सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने एक्सेप्ट किया है कि राफेल मामले में कोई ना कोई करप्शन, कोई ना कोई भ्रष्टाचार हुआ है। और जैसे मैं पहले से कह रहा हूं, अगर राफेल मामले पे इन्वेस्टिगेशन होगा तो दो नाम है, भाइयों और बहनों, दो नाम है, नरेंद्र मोदी जी और अनिल अंबानी जी।
Congress president probably doesn't read even a half a paragraph. He conveys things which are being told to him. And he understands things only that far. But here, by saying this, that court name मान लिया, and by also saying that the court has said चौकीदार चोर है, चौकीदार अनिल अंबानी को इतना पैसा देने का मान लिया है. These verge on contempt of court.
There you go. That's Rahul Gandhi versus Nirmala Sitharaman. Also, all of this happening literally 24 hours before the first ballot is cast in the largest election on this planet. Does this verdict by the Supreme Court offer the possibility for votes swinging the way of the Congress? Has it dealt a blow into the Bharatiya Janata Party's main election plank of national security? These are just some of the questions I asked former Finance Minister and senior Congress leader P. Chidambaram earlier in the day.
Please remember what the Attorney General told the Supreme Court at the first hearing, that the petition deserves to be dismissed because the petitioners had stolen official documents. Of course, outside the court, he modified his position when he realized the absurdity of that argument. Even yesterday, the government maintained that the documents had been stolen. What is the government trying to protect or hide? And I'm so happy that the court rejected this argument and said these documents can be used and will be taken into account when the review petition is heard. It is therefore a signal victory for all those who want the earlier judgment reviewed. The government tried its best to block a review. It tried to create all kinds of hurdles. It raised preliminary objections. They have been rejected, and now the review will be heard on merits. And that's a very significant development.
Mr. Chidambaram, you were saying that once again we will have the case on merits. Of course, the bench has not explained or told us when that review petition is going to be heard. What I want to understand from you is that with the admission of the new documents that has been allowed unanimously today, can this change the purview of the case? Can more evidence be indeed submitted? I'm asking this on behalf of all the viewers who are not lawyers, who do not understand all of these developments. What is this going to mean for the Rafale case? While the Bharatiya Janata Party says it's not a victory for the Congress, it does not necessarily mean that there's going to be a U-turn of the December verdict.
In my humble view, the December verdict was wrong. The court was misled or misdirected into reaching certain conclusions because the government held back vital facts. If these facts had been before the court, it's possible that the decision would have been different. Even now, it would be wrong to hazard what the decision will be. But at least one thing is clear, that the court is convinced that its earlier decision may be wrong. Let me underline, may be wrong, and therefore requires reconsideration. It's not often that the Supreme Court admits that its decision may be wrong. Whether it will eventually hold that the earlier decision was wrong, and therefore it merits a new decision, I cannot say. It would be inappropriate for anyone instructed in law to hazard such a guess. But I think it's significant that the Supreme Court has allowed the review to be heard on merits, which means there is serious doubt in the minds of the judges that the earlier decision may have been wrong.
Mr. Chidambaram, you know, you're stressing and emphasizing on the word may. I would like to say a lot of your colleagues in the Congress party are not using the word may the way you are. They have already joined all the dots. They've done a 1 + 1 = 3 and are saying Chaukidar chor hai, the Congress has been vindicated. Why is that the case? Is it also because it is election season?
You forgot my first sentence in the answer to the second question. I said, in my view, the judgment was wrong. I said, in my humble view, the judgment was wrong. When I emphasize the word may, I'm speaking for the judges. The judges have come to the conclusion that the decision may have been wrong. But if you ask my personal opinion, I maintain that the earlier judgment was wrong. So what is the contradiction? There is no contradiction. The emphasis on the word may is because the judges have not finally made up their mind. They've allowed the review to proceed on merits. Therefore, the correct interpretation is that the judges feel that the judgment may have been wrong. If I am arguing the case against the government, I will argue the judgment was wrong. The government will argue that the judgment was right, and the court will come to a final conclusion. But at least the door has been opened for a reconsideration.
You know, it's coming a day before the first ballot is cast in India, the largest election on this planet. Do you think the fact that these documents can now be admitted, the review petition still has to be heard, can it help at all in elections? Can it help swing votes for the Congress party at all?
No one decision, no one idea, no one argument sways an election. Elections are extremely local in this country. Even Lok Sabha elections are very localized elections. That's why the surveys are often wrong. This is not a homogeneous voting population. This decision will make a lot of people think that perhaps there was something wrong in the Rafale deal.
Well, that's an edited excerpt of my conversation with Senior Congress leader and former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram. Let's take this conversation forward now with my panelists. Joining me, Gopal Krishna Agarwal, the National Spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Pavan Khera, the Spokesperson for the Congress, Sushant Sareen, the Strategic Affairs Analyst and Senior Fellow at the ORF, and we also got Colonel Ajay Shukla, retired. He's, of course, you know him well, a senior journalist and writes very often on strategic affairs. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on ET Now. Since we just heard a lot from P. Chidambaram, the senior Congress leader, I'll go to the BJP first as I start this discussion. So I'll come to you, Mr. Agarwal. I'm going to ask you exactly what I asked Mr. Chidambaram. and that is this a case of the Congress perhaps jumping the hoop, connecting the dots even before it should? A 1 + 1 does not always have to equal 3, as we have seen in the past. Having said that, Rahul Gandhi in a Pethi today once again said, Chaukidar chor hai. He brought up Anil Ambani again, the 30,000 crore rupees that has been paid to Anil Ambani. It's election time, less than 12 hours from now, we will see the first ballot being cast. But a review petition, the admission of these documents doesn't necessarily mean the review petition is going to be successful whenever that hearing begins, whenever we have a verdict.
Definitely, this is the only thing that we have been telling, that court has only accepted that these documents may be presented for the review petition. They have not at present this moment of time till the court goes into the review petition and comes out with its final judgment. The earlier Supreme Court's judgment of saying that there is nothing wrong in the Rafale deal, every defense purchase procurement process was duly followed, and it had given a clean sheet to the government that exists, that stands as it is. So why the Congress is not accepting that? That's the important question. Just jumping the gun by only accepting the argument that, and rejecting the argument of the government that these documents were unauthorized, procured from the defense ministry and presented to the media, that should not be taken into cognizance for review petition. That argument the court at present have not accepted, but that doesn't mean the earlier decision is now nullified.
Okay, I take your point, Mr. Agarwal. Now let me just go to Pawan Khera. I take your point. I'm going to now go across to Pawan Khera. Pawan Khera, how is senior Congress leaders not in contempt of court, as Nirmala Sitharaman, the defense minister, earlier said? Your own Congress leader, P. Chidambaram, said it may overturn its December verdict, that we should emphasize on the word may. Having said that, why is it that even your Congress president and other senior members of the Congress party don't see it as a may, but see it more as it is going to? How can you do that? How can you preempt what the Supreme Court, the top court of the land, is going to decide?
Nayantara, isn't it a fact that the Supreme Court has agreed to a review petition, accepted the review petition? Point number one. Point number two, the Supreme Court rejected the government's plea that the documents in support of the review petition are stolen and therefore should not be trusted. Supreme Court has rejected that. Isn't it a fact that the reason why these documents went to the Supreme Court is also because the government got caught red-handed concealing vital information from the Supreme Court, whether it is of direct parallel negotiations by the Prime Minister's office and the NSA, whether it is amendment of DPP 2013, the Defence Procurement Procedure 2013, wherein exemptions were given to the seller, causing problems and losses to India's interests, not French interests. Isn't this a fact? Isn't this a fact too, that India's specific enhancements, the fact that you're paying 208 crore per aircraft extra on India's specific enhancements, was also concealed from the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court was also misled into believing that the CAG has already placed a report in the Parliament. So there are several such concealments which the Honorable Supreme Court in its wisdom has realized and therefore accepted the review petition. That's where we stand.
A review petition has been admitted, but that doesn't mean that the December verdict is going to be overturned. That's the point I was trying to make. Having said that, I want to now go to the defense experts that we have on the panel. Pawan, I'll come back to you. Ajay, let me first begin with you. Today's verdict, a unanimous one, very clear that it's okay for these documents to be admitted. they've gone into the fundamental rights section 19. All of that has been quoted. Lots of previous cases, even those that we've seen in the United States, of the cases that New York Times won. Now, having said that, even as all of this was going on, we did see a recent article that was published in The Hindu, and this investigation talked about unprecedented waivers in the offset agreement as well as the defense procurement procedure, provisions that were related to arbitration, access to book of accounts, penalties for the use of influence, commission agents not met. What I want to ask you is that with all of these documents now being admitted, do you think the purview of the case, the nature of the case, is going to be significantly different from what was decided by the Supreme Court when it delivered its verdict in December 2018?
Nayantara, there are two aspects over here. First is the political dimension of this entire issue. This is an intensely political issue. It is as much a political issue as it is an issue relating to defense procurement procedures and so on. And to that extent, what happens and what the Supreme Court rules and to what extent it's willing to overturn its earlier verdict is a political question more than a defense procurement question at this point in time. The elections are starting tomorrow. So it is in any case, even if the Supreme Court lists the matter at very short notice, hears it very quickly, it's only going to affect a part of this election. And now the question is also, how much resonance does the Rafale issue carry, given that Balakot and Pulwama and national security and Pakistan have come and overtaken it in the public consciousness. So to that extent, there's this whole issue of the political question surrounding this debate. As far as the defense procurement question goes, that's a whole different kettle of fish there. And people like me who study defense procurement believe that there are significant loopholes, there are significant drawbacks in the way that this deal was conducted. It was not really a deal that followed the procedure of the defense procurement in letter and in law. And to that extent, if the Supreme Court is now willing to start examining these documents, which it wasn't, mind you, the first time around that it heard the case, it was more at a sort of hands-off distance at that stage. But if it's now going to start going into these documents, is going to start accepting the documents that have been unearthed in the Hindu, is going to start treating government statements with a greater degree of skepticism, then it could well be that it comes out with significant findings that cast a shadow over the deal and make it appear that it was not entirely following regulations in the manner that it should have. Nayantara?
Gopal, I know you want to come in. I'm going to come back to you, but let me first just go to Sushant Sareen for his initial comments. Sushant, how realistic is the fear that perhaps in this entire controversy, the real casualty might actually be the Indian Air Force? Even after Bofors, we saw how that impacted procurement, how it impacted new orders. With this Rafale controversy going on, is that going to, do you fear, hurt the Indian Air Force? Especially like Ajay pointed out, so much is being talked about border security and, the geopolitics changing after Pulwama and the Balakot airstrikes. Could the real tragedy be that India will go slow on new procurement?
Well, I hope that doesn't happen. It would be extremely unfortunate if that was to happen, because as it is, it's taken us, close to 2 decades to go in for new fighter aircraft. And if we are going to spend maybe, so we already have people saying that the MiG-21 is a very capable aircraft. So perhaps 50 years from now, we'll still be flying MiG-21s and then wondering why, we haven't fared as well as we should have in an air skirmish. So if that was to happen, I think that would be unfortunate, but I'm hoping that won't, because even the Congress party admits that the Rafale is a very good aircraft. I don't think they've said that they have anything against the deal, and their objections, much of what they have raised is not so much about the procurement of the aircraft, but I think the objections are more political in nature, and they are leveling allegations, which in my view, I think they are a little far-fetched. I am not entirely convinced by the allegations. The second point is that look, this is a review petition. At the end of the day, if some new facts have come or the petitioners have brought in some new facts, the judges are well within their rights to say, okay, fine, we'll examine these documents also. But that does not mean that when they go in for the review petition, they're going to overturn their previous verdict. They might examine these documents, but to my mind, at least none of these documents really change the fundamental nature of what has happened in this entire deal. Now, it could be somebody's, like Ajay is arguing, and I respect his views, but I don't think there is any real evidence of any malfeasance in this entire deal. This talk about parallel negotiations, anybody who has dealt with or seen how governments negotiate on contracts, there is a lot of toing and froing within the committees which are examining these things. You don't expect that if there are 7 or 10 members in a committee, all of them will only say yes to every single clause of a particular deal. There will be objections, there will be debates, and they will go up and down the chain, and somebody will say, okay, fine, there is this thing that, okay, fine, the principals will talk to each other and issue instructions. That's not a parallel negotiation. Now, to construe from these documents that there was some kind of a parallel negotiation and some kind of conspiracy was being hashed, I think that's a little far-fetched. But, I wouldn't hazard, like Mr. Chidambaram was saying, and I think he was quite right, that the courts may decide that they would want to go further deeper into this whole thing, or they may decide that, well, they've seen these, examined these documents, they'll hear both parties, and they might decide that there is nothing further which needs to be examined in this whole deal. And I don't think any one of us can be presumptuous enough to think how the courts are going to rule on this.
Gopal Agarwal, I know you wanted to come in, but before that, I wanted to also pose this question to you. And that is a finance minister of this country who has also served in the past as defense minister. And the incumbent defense minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, have said this quite often. That it was the Cabinet Committee on Security that had cleared the deal. But when did this approval come in? Was it on April 10th, 2015? Or was it in 13th May 2015 when the Defence Acquisition approved it, or was it on 23rd September 2016 when the deal was finally executed? People like Ajay Shukla have raised the question of timing. Pawan Khera would probably want to jump in on this. So I'm giving you an opportunity. Why don't you tell us when exactly this approval came in?
Nayantara, the question on Rafale has been categorically and many times answered in the parliament and the press conference of the ministry. Everybody has answered every question. What the Congress is doing is that not accepting the answer and again coming out with the same set of lies or a different set of lies and asking questions. I would like, before I answer, I would like to ask two questions from the Congress. Do they accept the Supreme Court verdict judgment uniformly or only when it suits them? When Supreme Court gave a clean sheet, they washed their hand. No, the petition was not filed as, it was an independent bodies. We did not take part into this. So we want a JPC, and they did not accept the judgment of the Supreme Court giving clean sheet. Now they are jumping in that, preempting the decisions. So they have to their only strategy is to confuse people before the elections and keep a conspiracy theory live so that there will be confusion. Second thing I would like to tell you is that when the government has said, and even the Supreme Court, yes, I am answering your question, when the Supreme Court said the defense purchase DPP process of procurement has been very clearly followed in this purchase of Rafale deal, that is the categorical judgment last time the Supreme Court gave, that every process of defense purchase procurement which is as defined by the government, which was in place before our government came and which was accepted in later on, that this is the process. No middleman, no, there will be direct. So that, yes, so that was when there is a clear cut,
because you made some accusation. No, 1 second, Gopal Agarwal, we can't have monologues. Let's bring in Pawan Khera as well. These are not speeches. Pawan Khera, you are by the Bharatiya Janata Party being accused of cherry picking what you like. When you want to choose to align yourself with Prashant Bhushan, Yashwant Sinha and Arun Shourie, you do it. When it doesn't suit you, you don't do it. That's one accusation that's being made. The second, I want to ask you that do you really want to fall into this trap of Rafale ahead of elections? Is it really even an issue for this election?
Nayantara, number one, there was nothing called a clean chit in the earlier order of the Supreme Court. Number two, whatever order the Honorable Supreme Court had issued then rested and depended on the sealed envelope and the unsigned affidavits in that sealed envelope. Number three, on August 5, 2015, the Defence Procurement Procedure 2013 was amended, and this was not brought to the notice of the Honorable Supreme Court. And what were the amendments? The amendments also did away with the integrity clauses. And what were those integrity clauses? Bribe, reward, agency commission, agent, nothing will be applicable here. Everything is exempted for the seller. This is a very critical aspect which was amended from the DPP 2013. Bank guarantee. They didn't even inform the Supreme Court before the earlier order that they had done away with the need for a sovereign guarantee. They say it was an intergovernmental agreement. We needed a bank guarantee, we needed a sovereign guarantee, it was done away with. Every second step, the INT, the Indian negotiating team's efforts and negotiations were weakened because of the parallel negotiations, and the INT was not kept in the loop by the PMO when they were holding parallel negotiations with the French sellers. Why on earth would they do that? On April 10, 2015, you make that joint declaration with the French president, reducing 126 to 36. Why? Where do you arrive on that figure? How do you arrive on that figure? And post facto, you amend DPP in August 2015, and you say this is not an issue. Nobody undermines or denies the capacity, the capability of Rafale as a fighter, and its utility for us, its appropriateness for Indian conditions. Tomorrow you can turn around and argue, but telecom sectors would have suffered, therefore we shouldn't raise the 2G issue. The power sector would suffer, therefore let's not raise the coal block issue. How can you have these selective arguments that because defense can suffer, let's not raise corruption in a defense deal, and that too a corruption which involves none other than the Prime Minister's office, none other than the NSA's office.
One second. I'll let Sushant Shireen counter you. Sushant Shireen, you have in the past maintained there is nothing wrong with this deal. Then I'm going to go to Ajay Shukla. You want to take on Pawan Khera. I don't even know why this should even be an elections issue, because in several surveys that have been carried out, and that's something I'm going to be discussing as well. I'll let you counter on all the points that has been raised right now by Pawan Khera.
There's nothing to counter, because I don't think there's any point in countering, because I think the Congress party thinks they have latched on to a good thing and they're just raising it. I'm not sure if it's going to pay them any dividends in this election. There are a whole lot of other things they can raise with a lot more effect than this particular issue, but I think in their own wisdom they think that by raising the Rafale issue and leveling these kind of allegations, making insinuations, if they think they're going to get a few extra votes, good luck to them. I don't have any problem with what they are doing. I'm not involved one way or another. But the important thing is, see, number one, he talks about the bank guarantee. If you're going to insist upon a bank guarantee, then there is a certain cost entailed with the bank guarantee. Now, clearly, if when the two governments are negotiating, and the governments can come to the conclusion, okay, fine, we'll waive off the bank guarantee, and perhaps the cost factor does not go up by what it would have had the bank guarantee been insisted upon. So these are things which happen. Now, whether they strictly conform to every single clause of the DPP, I'll leave that to Ajay to answer. He's quite competent on that. But I think that was a matter of negotiation. The other factor which he makes is on the why 36 out of 126, because 126 would have been unaffordable at the price at which the negotiations were taking place, and 36 because that is a bare minimum you need for the aircraft acquisitions to make any kind of sense. You have to have 2 or 3 squadrons, so that is what you go in for, with leaving the clause that if you want to increase the number of purchases later on. That has been built into the clause. The other thing is about the India specific enhancements. That's a kind of a fixed cost, and if you went in for more aircraft, then the per aircraft cost of the India specific enhancements would come down by a certain factor. But since you went in for a lower number of aircraft, the per the India specific enhancement costs go up. Clearly, there is no real evidence of any massive kind of gold plating being done on this deal and some kind of money being siphoned off. There is no real evidence of that, and if that is not there, then to do the kind of hair splitting which has been done over the last couple of months, I don't know how much sense it makes. Perhaps it makes sense to the Congress party and the opposition, but it doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's a very good aircraft, and if we are getting it, it's very good for us.
Ajit, again, that whole problem, is the real casualty going to be the Indian Air Force and the security forces, which may have to go slow down its acquisition strategy simply with this, major overhang, this major controversy that's in the works. And before we take a commercial break, Sushant has asked you to come in, that 126 versus 36. You had serious problems with this deal, procurement strategy, right from the word go. You've written a lot about that. Also as a citizen, we've seen so many trading of charges. Do you think that India will ever get to know the real story?
The real story of what? Repeat yourself, Nayantara, please.
Will we ever really get to know the real cost of Rafale, for example? Which side is actually genuine in misleading India?
Oh, well, there is no real cost of the Rafale. The cost is a function of how a country negotiates and how it arrives at the cost in discussions with the other country. Now, this is where the Rafale negotiation falls short, because when you do away with bank guarantees, when you do away with sovereign guarantees, you are effectively letting the buyer, the seller, I beg your pardon, off from a certain financial and fiscal responsibility that he would otherwise have incurred. And in that sense, you're depriving yourself of a certain service. Now, if you accept that, and I'm not trying to make the case that we must have sovereign guarantees and we must have bank guarantees, but if we agree not to have them, then that much must be shaved off the cost of the aircraft. When you're comparing the two deals, the earlier deal for 126 aircraft included the cost of sovereign and bank guarantees, whereas we eventually concluded a contract that did not include those. So we should correspondingly have got it that much cheaper. Now, a country like India can afford to lose a certain amount of money. We're a big buyer. We're a relatively wealthy country when it comes to splashing money around on arms. But what I'm saying here is that when we don't negotiate a contract properly, it detracts from our reputation. It makes the next negotiator that comes in to negotiate a big contract, which could also be in the billions of dollars, that much more cavalier about dealing with India. The belief will be spread that India can just be pussyfooted with, it can be ridden roughshod over. They don't know how to negotiate. And that is something that is very dangerous. The rest of these issues can be argued here and there. Should we have had this? Should we have not had this? Should a procedure have been done? But at the end of the day, India's reputation has suffered. Internationally, we are suffering because people are now saying, look at the way that they've conducted this procurement process. They started off with 126, they ended up with just 36. They had built this process as the world's most professionally conducted procurement process for aircraft, and look where they've ended. So all in all, I think India's reputation has taken a blow here.
Okay, so has India indeed suffered a reputation blow globally? What should be the procurement strategy going forward? Is the Congress walking into a trap of an issue which should really be a non-issue? Pose those questions and a lot more after this short commercial break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching India Development Debate with me, Nayantara Rai. Just a day ahead of Battle 2019, the largest election on this planet, also the world's most expensive election. The Supreme Court delivered its verdict, which is being seen as a setback for the incumbent government. It has allowed documents to be admitted in the review petition for Rafale, which the centre said was stolen and photocopied illegally and violated several acts, including the Official Secrets Act. Pawan Khera, I'm going to come to you right now. The question I want to ask you is that would you concede that just from the BJP's perspective, this turned out to be a brilliant legal strategy, with the Attorney General actually saying that this is stolen property and it should not be admitted? The entire review petition got delayed. It's gotten delayed to such an extent, and Ajay Shukla raised this point in his first answer, that whatever the Supreme Court now decides as the fate of the review petition, it cannot be known perhaps before the last phase of election. Do you concede that you have perhaps been outwitted by the Bharatiya Janata Party with this legal strategy, and maybe the petitioners fell into this trap?
No, I mean, I'm glad if people want to make a necessity out of virtue out of a necessity. I think they goofed up big time. The fact that every document that comes in public domain through investigative journalism is quote unquote stolen, and in a democracy, media is free to carry stories, investigative stories. This government shows its true colors by saying, oh, this is Official Secrets Act and it was stolen. And we say, oh, BJP, it's a brilliant strategy on part of the... I think we have been overestimating the so-called Chanakyas of the BJP. They are nothing but they try and be very street smart, and at times everything boomerangs on them. Today, for example, since morning we've been seeing how much of a jhatka they've been getting since morning. Now, another very critical aspect hidden from the Supreme Court was that we'll take 10 years to get these fighter planes, by the way. There is a backlog order of 83 already. This also was concealed. And if they had stuck to the original UPA deal, perhaps we would have started seeing Rafale fighters on our soil. By repeatedly saying that, oh, why is Congress so stupid? Why are they making an election issue out of it? It is not an election issue. Maybe it's not an election issue, but it's an issue which the country deserves to know, that there has been corruption at the highest level, especially from a person who says,
You couldn't do it for 12 years. You wanted the UPA deal to go through. Pawan Khera, you wanted the UPA deal to go through, but the fact still remains UPA was in power for 12 years. This deal didn't go through.
12 years? Number one, UPA was in power for 10 years. Number two, the Indian Air Force tested 6 different aircrafts from different companies. Wait. 6 different aircrafts of different companies on 643 parameters. It took 6.5 years. Number one. So please do not accuse us of sitting on our files for 10 years. Absolutely incorrect. This is a bogey being spread by the BJP. They don't do their homework. Ask them how much time did the Indian Air Force take, and it is right. They have to take that much of time if they are testing the planes on 643 criteria. Finally, on 12th December 2012, the L1 happened, Dassault was shortlisted. After that, the negotiations between HAL and Dassault started. In March 2015, the negotiations 95% got completed, but within 7 days, Mr. Prime Minister goes to Paris, throws everything in the dustbin, announces royally that 36 aircrafts. Nothing changed between the aircraft we had chosen and the aircraft they have chosen. Nothing new added or removed from the aircraft as per the joint declaration. So please give us our due. Rahul Gandhi is the only one talking about Rafale, and today the Supreme Court has taken absolute cognizance of all the objections, of all that has come out in public domain now, despite repeated attempts by this government to stifle every voice, to call us anti-national just because we are questioning corruption. Just because it's a defense deal does not mean you can get away with corruption. Please do not help this government hide behind
Agarwal,
national
come in.
security and get away with loot.
Gopal Agarwal, I'm going to allow you now to come in and counter. It is, a day before elections. Having said that, serious charges being made over here as well. And in the Supreme Court, you have lost. At least by saying that these documents should not have seen the light of the day, should have never been published in national dailies, that there was stolen property. That has been unanimously struck down. And at a time as well, at the end of the Narendra Modi government's first tenure, where charges have been traded against your party for trying to gag the media or for undermining institutions. Would you concede that a day before elections, perhaps this is a setback? Because a charge has been, your argument has been struck down by the Supreme Court. And several acts that had been cited by you have been struck down.
No, it was a, yes. Nayantara, the first and foremost, we have been repeatedly saying that this is a procedural argument that has been struck down, and which is in itself is correct, but they have not accepted this document is stolen and unauthorized. That is not the question. That is not in question. Only issue is that whether the court should take cognizance. Our government view was it should not take cognizance.
Have you found the people in the Defence Ministry who have stolen them and photocopied it and leaked it? When you also talk about this being stolen and all of that, one question I think a lot of people want to know is that have you found the culprits, those who are guilty of actually stealing the stolen property? And have you found the culprits? Have you started acting against them?
3, 4. Yeah, the Defence Ministry is already taking action, cognizance, FIR, whatever
yes or no?
they are doing according to their defence procedure. No, I tell you, let me complete. There were 3, 4 questions. Let me complete. The second important thing is Congress, we are comparing, Congress is trying to compare a deal which is not in existence with the deal which has been executed. Earlier, it was only a negotiation which did not complete, and the defence deal, the requirement was set in 2000, which Congress did not take cognizance or act till 2014, and they themselves, Mr. Anthony said that let us restart the procedure. It is noted in the file, it is in the public domain. Then what is the thing that 14 years you do not fulfill the requirement just because you did not get your commission? This is the only charge that the thing is that the Congress top leader who were used to get their share in every defence deal, they did not get their share, so they tried to just nullify the deal and start the process again. The second point is we have very clearly said that in Congress deal, when they talk about the price, there was a clause that they will add the exchange rate fluctuation and interest.
Okay, we're going to go to defence experts now. We'll go to the defence experts. We'll go to the defence. Okay, I want to go to the defence experts now. Ajay Shukla, you had made this entire point that while it's not necessary to have a sovereign guarantee, it's not necessary to have a bank guarantee, it should be shaved off. And the art is in the art of negotiations. So having said that, how is this even supposed to be decided if it's actually above board, not above board, if it's all about the art of negotiations? Having said that, can you also tell us globally what is the norm? Have you seen large orders like this by other countries where there have been bank guarantees that have been not provided or sovereign guarantees? If you could share that here, give us examples of what actually happens, and let's talk about more with the developed world.
Antara, that's a very good question, and I have to say that there are very few countries, if any countries at all, that tie their own hands the way we do with our own defence procurement procedure. We mire our bureaucracy and our national security decision-making elites with such a web and such a network of rules and regulations, none of which can be deviated from, that actually reaching a conclusion and reaching some kind of decision becomes well nigh impossible. So to that extent, the DPPs, successive versions of them, there have been 8 so far, they have served only to hinder procurement rather than to open the doors for procurement. How other countries do it is by choosing a platform or a weapon system that they want to buy based on a broad strategic evaluation rather than making out some kind of a cast iron GSQR qualitative requirements set from which you cannot deviate even 1 micromillimeter. So you make out a more broad evaluation of what systems would suit you better. Like in this case, it could be that we want the Rafale because I'm talking totally hypothetically, Dassault is willing to help us develop our medium combat aircraft. So you combine 3 or 4 different elements and different benefits into one deal. How our DPP, however, structures it is that each deal is structured in its own little silo with its own little QRs, all of which must be met. And if there's any deviation from that, then it's seen as a sort of fatal error, perhaps even as corruption. So this is something that is common to both the BJP and the Congress. Both parties have been held back from decision making. For example, when the proposal to buy a combat aircraft started off, it was proposed to buy the Mirage 2000 factory from France and just transfer it to India. But George Fernandes, who was the defense minister at that time, was so worried about being accused of corruption that he said, no, let's go in for a full DPP type procurement. And we saw that gradually 2 governments and eventually a 3rd government got locked into a web of rules and regulations and were not able to take forward the deal at all. So we really need to change our whole approach to procurement, deal with it more strategically, build in several benefits that can be used, including the sort of technology benefits associated with the deal, what technology the people are willing to supply along with that platform, and then take it forward. That's the path we need to adopt.
So you know what, Ajay, you've raised such a pertinent point, and since we're running out of time, I'm going to ask both the BJP and Congress panelists to listen to the answer that I'm going to try and get from Sushant Sareen. Let's end with hope. Tomorrow there is going to be an election. We will know the result on counting day, May 23rd. But for the new government, how can we get rid of this kind of policy paralysis? How can the next government do a better job with procurement? I know, it's not fair for me to put you in a spot and ask you this. Is perhaps, a conversation that requires a lot more time. But let's end the debate today with some hope. And I'm going to give that mantle to you, Sushant.
I don't think it's going to happen because, the political climate is so vitiated now. I couldn't put it better the way Ajay has put it, because the entire procurement process is totally broken. So much so that very often when the QRs are actually prepared, they are prepared for a product which does not even exist on this universe. And because you are basically looking at various literature and you are trying to add all the best. It's like how a Punjabi goes and buys a computer. He wants the latest in everything, and all that he wants to do is word processing. So the point which Ajay made about what your strategic requirements are, what kind of strategic planning you are doing, how do you see your strategic environment unfold over the next 25 years, because any weapons platform which you are going to buy is going to service you for the next at least 2 to 3 decades, if not longer. So clearly we really need a certain degree of expertise in this field, and unfortunately neither the politicians nor the bureaucrats, and I would blame the bureaucrats a lot more in this entire thing than I would blame the politicians, because the politicians are not supposed to be experts, but the bureaucrats, especially the IAS guys, think they are the repository of all the wisdom. So the system is really broken, and until and unless whoever comes into power next is willing to grapple this bull by the horn and change it, I'm afraid we are barking up the wrong tree. We'll keep going around and round.
What you're suggesting, with what you're suggesting, you basically need reforms in the UPSC. And let's be fair, how are our bureaucrats also experts in defense? They rotated from ministry to ministry. And having said that, but I will also tell you, I take offense at that Punjabi remark. I am a Punjabi and I don't think I go by the biggest and the fanciest machine, but I let that one go. We're completely out of time. So I'd like to thank all 4 of you for joining us here and trying to make us understand this. Tomorrow is, of course, a big day, Dance of Democracy, the most expensive election, the biggest election on this planet, is going to kickstart with the first phase. And in fact, that's going to be very much the next debate right here on ET Now. We're going to put the spotlight on the Election Commission. How does it augur on the Election Commission today? 66 bureaucrats, just ex-bureaucrats, just yesterday complained about the behavior of the Election Commission. And within 24 hours, the Narendra Modi biopic has been banned by it, and so has Namo TV. That coming up next.